afternoon. I'm Al Cresta. Lots of questions regarding the lives of chaste Catholics who are same-sex attracted. We're going to be asked to go to weddings. We're going to have friends whose sons and daughters come out. These are questions that are coming up increasingly. And over the next year, I think this is going to break out in at least American Catholicism. We're trying to make sure that we understand the issues. Joining me right now is Father Paul Check. He is the director of Courage. It's an organization which exists to help Catholics live faithful lives of chastity, even as they struggle with same-sex attraction. I hope you will find out more about this ministry by going to couragerc.org. When same-sex attractions are called disordered, some people think that's a harsh term.
There's no doubt that the phrase objectively disordered will fall hard on ears, and people will immediately associate that with a moral condemnation of an individual. The phrase does not apply to a person. It applies to an appetite, an attraction. Perhaps another way of saying it is that the Church understands the homosexual inclination to be a poverty. Many of the men who are part of Courage will say that they feel a void. There is something that they think is missing that makes them in some way less than a man. Now, we know that they aren't less than a man,
right,
objectively speaking, but this is a feeling that they have. And flowing from that, the second poverty is the natural attraction of a man to a woman or a woman to a man. So these ideas that the Church has are, of course, based in her understanding of the creation story. There's a rational basis and a basis that's grounded in the Church's desire that people find joy and fulfillment in accordance with the way God has made us.
We know that the Church will never sanction homosexual so-called marriage for the person who is same-sex attracted, who longs for the kind of personal commitment and intimacy. What are the options?
St. Thomas describes continence, which means no genital sexual activity. He describes continence as an imperfect virtue, because we don't yet know why someone is not entering into that realm. There is more to our understanding about how two people are together than just whether they are refraining from physical contact.
Right.
Chastity is that integration of the sexual desire or attraction into the human person in such a way that it testifies to what God told us about when He created the first people. And He urged them to be fruitful and multiply by the two becoming one flesh.
Do you know of instances where two men, at one time struggling with same-sex attraction, come to support one another in a friendship and regard each other in some way as a, quote, couple?
I would be concerned to know what the motivation was, because I wouldn't want to presume someone's intentions, but that would be contrary to the Church's understanding of what same-sex friendship is. Same-sex friendship is not going to have an erotic component to it.
Is there still a drive to want to have a, quote, partner?
Probably there is, because we are blessedly incomplete. So we know that in and of ourselves, something is lacking and missing.
I've noticed among some chaste Catholics there's been a movement afoot, an attempt to, quote, celebrate one's same-sex attraction as a, quote, gift. From what we've talked about so far, that sounds way off base.
If we go back to the idea of a poverty, that would seem to me to indicate that if something is missing that should be there and it's not, it isn't something to celebrate, strictly speaking. God works for the good in all things, all things for those who love Him. He doesn't further distinguish and say good things from bad things.
Right.
He says in all things.
All things.
So that means that grace can be at work in a poverty, and now it's an invitation to grace and to grow in virtue.
Somebody can glory in the cross of Christ. You can see this poverty as your condition, and you expect that God in His sovereignty is working all things, including this poverty, together for good. So in that sense, it can be celebrated.
That's right. And then I think we find where the proper seat of the gifts is going to be.